Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Rose. I'm editor at Gamasutra, and as the name of the talk would suggest, I'm going to try and inspire you guys into an indie game uprising in Lithuania today. So I've been covering indie games for quite some time now. I sort of started to notice that there was some kind of uprise going on probably in around about 2008, sort of around about the time when games like Braid and World of Goo, those kind of things were appearing. So I started writing about indie games. That was sort of how I got into this whole writing about video games malarkey. And in sort of 2009, start of 2009, I got picked up to write for indiegames.com, which is sort of Gamasutra's like indie-centric website. And I would say probably when I first started writing for indiegames.com, I was probably getting about 3 to 4 emails a day from indie developers asking us to write about their games. So it was basically quite easy to get your game written about back then because there weren't that many developers trying to get their stuff written about. Now it's more like sort of 30 plus emails every day from indie developers. And I'm sure that's the same for the editors of all of the big sites, Kotaku, etc. Must be even more than that. So obviously it's quite a tight space now to get covered. As well, like compared to back then, players are just way more into indie games now. So back then it was it was very much sort of seen as, oh, I play my AAA boxed games, I don't care for that indie crap. There's still lots of people that say that these days, but it's kind of merged a lot more now. I guess with the advent of digital sort of overtaking box a lot, it's kind of got to the point where people are stop calling them indie games so much, and it's just games now, especially on consoles. It's very difficult to see the difference between the two. So these are just some of the sort of recent examples of this sort of indie boom that is still ongoing. It's been going for quite a few years now, and I wouldn't even say it's hit its peak yet. It's still very much an ongoing thing. So you probably recognize some of these games, things like Gone Home, Dive Kick, Fez, Guacamelee, Don't Starve, Spelunky. These are all sort of games that started from very small developers, maybe an individual or a small team, and have sort of grown into these great, massive things now where they've sold tons and tons of copies and done really well for themselves. So this is just kind of a general idea of what you could sort of aim for right now if you wanted to. So why exactly is this sort of occurring right now? So one of the main points is that it's just so much easier to make a game now. I mean, I talked to people who were making games like 20 years ago. And they can't believe the sort of tools that are available now. I'm sure, like, for example, the majority of you know of Unity and how ridiculously easy it is to sort of, you make your game and then you can deploy it to multiple different platforms. That kind of thing was just never available. So it's sort of made it quite a bit easier to get into making games. It's a lot easier to self-publish games as well now. So if it's on PC, you can easily just build your game and put it out there on your own website or on one of the smaller distribution platforms. Of course, if you really want to sell well, you want to get on Steam, but that's a different matter entirely, unless you want to go through Greenlight. Mobile, of course, with the App Store and Google Play. It's very easy to put your own mobile games out now. Again, it's more difficult to get noticed on mobile, but there's always the self-publishing options there. Even on console now as well, Sony, especially with PlayStation, has started to make it a lot easier to put your games on their platforms now. Xbox are getting into it with Idea Xbox. I mean, it's not as easy as on PC and mobile, but console is definitely starting to. I think the big manufacturers are starting to see that this is the way things are going, and maybe they should get involved. Getting the word out about your game as well is so much easier than it used to be. So you've got things like Twitter and Facebook. If you can get videos on YouTube, then kind of those can lead to your games exploding somewhat, and you going from small-time developer to relatively nicely sized in a small space of time. So all of these things are sort of coming together to mean that this is like the perfect time now to be making games, and it's just easier than ever for you to be making games and getting to as many people as possible, especially compared to, you know, sort of even 5 years ago, a lot of these options weren't available. So where exactly is this indie boom happening? The answer really is sort of everywhere. It's great for me personally when I'm covering games. I love finding these kind of clusters of game developers kind of popping up all over the place. You know, especially in Europe, it's absolutely fantastic to be seeing where games are coming from. So some of the kind of big success stories, I guess one of the biggest ones from Europe is like the Dutch scene. I mean, 5 years ago, I remember I was kind of covering, you know, some of the smaller developers. They had all these little things going on. They had their own little groups, and out of that, some kind of massive companies have started to appear. So. You've probably heard of Vlambeer. It's still just these two guys who it was. You know, they started up like 4 years ago or something. They've now, you know, most recently they put out Lufthausers, Ridiculous Fishing, which is shown here. That was like Apple's Game of the Year last year. And they've got plenty more games where that came from as well, and they're currently working on Nuclear Throne. So they've kind of been a big driving force for the Dutch game scene. And then you've got like Metrico from Digital Dreams, which is a kind of platformer based around bar charts and infographics. That's coming out of on a PlayStation platform soon. Ronimo Games, they've most recently had Awesome Noughts. They also put out Swords and Soldiers, which was another excellent game from those guys. Mo Manga Pinball Adventures from Paladin Studios. So I mean, these are all kind of decent sized indie developers, and they're all kind of working together to show like how, you know, like I say, 5 years ago there wasn't that much coming out of the Dutch scene, and now it's kind of one of the biggest scenes that's going on in Europe at the moment. But even sort of the smaller scenes that are going on. So uh, about a year ago, I would say I hadn't really heard of any developers from Austria. I think I'd heard of Broken Rules. Uh, they made games like And Yet It Moves, which was a big Nintendo Wii digital game. They also had made one of the Wii U launch games, and now they're putting together this Secrets of Raticom, which they funded via Kickstarter. So that's they